Hello, my name is Jess. I'm a librarian at UK University, and Laura has asked me to make a short video telling you a little bit about what information resources we'd really like you to be using in your work. So today I'm going to just go through very quickly some of the resources that you might use and the reasons why you might use them. I'm going to start off with the assumption that most of you will probably use Google and the internet on a regular basis. Nothing wrong with that at all, but what I would like you to think about is the reasons why you do that. Google is a company that was founded by two people who were originally very much against making money out of search engines, and then they changed their minds. In the year 2000 it started offering keyword-based advertising services, so companies could pay for keywords that people would put into a search engine to be automatically related to their website or a certain page on their website. Search engine optimization is what happens when different words are put into the functions of the website, the behind the scenes if you will, in order for you to be able to find it quicker. And what Google does very cleverly is it remembers your searches in order to predict what you would like to search next. Whilst this is incredibly useful in terms of being able to find things that you might find useful in everyday life, such as going to the cinema, finding a little bit about your favourite recipe or celebrity, or finding blogs like mine, because videos come top of the ranking in Google searches. When it comes to academic resources, the problem with finding things on the internet is that you really have to look into evaluating them. I'm going to do another video on evaluating resources separately to this, but what I would like you to think about primarily is the fact that on the internet people can pay for you to look at their resources first if you go through a search engine. That can lead to different companies and organisations having a greater influence on what you are finding and what you are using than you might think that they do. So that's the internet, that's Google. What I'm going to move on to though is really talking about the stuff that me and Laura think you should be looking at. So that would be primarily journals, but I'm going to start with books because hopefully you'll have used a book at some point. My assumption that I'm going to use is that at some point in your life you have read a book. Maybe not this one, maybe not something as thick as this one, but at some point you'll have been either around someone who has read a book or read a book yourself. Now, when it comes to academia, there are various kinds of books and resources that you can use. There is your classic textbook. You might have used these in school when you were younger, maybe in high school, and these will give you a more well-rounded version of the subject. So in this instance, this is a classic textbook on British history between the years 1815 and 1918, and that's going to give a really just an overview of that history. It's not looking at any detail, it's there for you to get a good grounding in the subject so you can pass your exams. And students in the UK will probably use books like this whilst doing something called Gcses, and they are the general certificates of education. They're what you get when you're about 15, 16. We also have things that you may use in a more professional context. So this is a book by Jeff Petty, who's a very famous writer in the world of education and training in the UK. And this is a very popular textbook again, but it's more concentrated on the professional elements. So if you were going to train to be a teacher, this is the sort of book you would be reading. And in terms of being a historian or a social historian, you might be looking at more books that look around the whole subject as a whole. So it's not as big an overview as a textbook, a little bit more in depth, but again, gives you a good grounding into the subject. And then you've got your classics, so the books that were written many, many years ago. I'm looking at Beveridge for today, and you can probably tell these have been read a fair number of times in the library. They're a little bit worn, but we encourage you to read classics of this type because these are the groundings of books like this. Books like this are made up of people digesting books like this, but the problem is that at your level you are the one who should be digesting. You are the one who knows what this stuff is in great detail, and that's why you've chosen to do the subject you're doing. Those are books But more importantly, I think, well, not more importantly, but more relevant in an academic context would be your journal articles. Now, a journal is a collection of articles put together by a peer-reviewed board of academics, usually academics in the field. So if you are an academic, what thing that you really want to do is get your work, get your research into a peer-reviewed journal. These journals cost a lot of money, okay, a lot of money. You can have things like trade journals. So I've got the Early Years Educator. It's a very popular trade journal for nursery school workers, people working with very young children. This sort of journal will give you advice if you are working in a nursery setting. Trade journals wise, for your subject, for history, there's a really good magazine called the BBC History Magazine. It gives, again, an overview of a specific subject, but they're not academically peer-reviewed, usually. Other academic journals, though, the ones that look like this, usually now are not in print anymore because the internet is cheaper for people to produce and for publishers to make money on. So you will find that within your library, quite a lot, in fact, most of your holdings are probably online. And that's where your money's really going to go. And that's the sort of stuff that you really need to be reading and focusing on. Peer-reviewed journals have academic integrity, or they should. They also will give you a more concentrated view on your topics that you are looking at. Now, the reason we're saying this to you isn't to put you off studying this subject. It's to make you excited about being part of this community. If you imagine that your work, your assignments are the tip of a really large iceberg of information, the layer under you is everything you are referencing. Yeah, everything you are referencing. Underneath that, underneath the level of the sea, is this massive body of academic work, the big thick ones, that make up this research family. If you are not referencing things that within this search family, you are not going to be part of this wider world. And at some point, the tip of the iceberg, you could be referenced by someone else and join the larger part. So what I'm saying to you is, please do use the internet, Google things, use other search engines, Bing, Yahoo, whatever you use. But please think about using some of the other resources that we really desperately want you to use, because that's what makes you an academic and that's what going to college is all about.